Welcome to Life Stories, where we share moments that inspire, challenge, and remind us of what truly matters. Today's story takes us to a luxury car dealership, where one man's casual visit becomes an unforgettable lesson in respect and humility. A simple hoodie and unassuming demeanor lead to surprising assumptions, but the truth that unfolds leaves everyone speechless. This is a tale of character over appearance and how small actions can spark big changes. Stay tuned. And don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to hear the incredible journey we're about to share today. The sun blazed over Austin, Texas, casting a golden glow on the polished glass facade of Elite Auto Gallery. James Parker stepped out of his unassuming SUV, the vehicle blending seamlessly into the background of a lot lined with sleek, high-end cars. The heat clung to him like an unwelcome embrace. But he was used to it. Adjusting the hood of his simple grey sweatshirt, James scanned the dealership's entrance, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The towering letters spelling out Elite Auto Gallery gleamed under the sunlight, exuding a sense of grandeur that felt almost intimidating. James had owned the dealership for just over a month, but today was the first time he stepped through its doors as an ordinary customer. His decision to come incognito wasn't made lightly. Years of experience in the business world taught him one fundamental truth: the way people treat you when they think you're a nobody reveals everything about their character. This visit wasn't about flashy displays or grand introductions, it was about honesty. As James approached the entrance, he noticed the showroom bustling with activity. The smell of leather and fresh polish wafted out as the automatic doors slid open, welcoming him into a world of luxury and aspiration. The bright overhead lights gleamed on meticulously displayed vehicles, sleek sports cars, towering SUVs, and elegant sedans. Each one was a promise of status and success. And yet, for James, they were merely tools for understanding how people interacted with those promises. The low hum of conversation between employees near the front desk briefly halted as James entered. Their eyes flicked toward him, some narrowing in a fleeting glance before quickly shifting away. He caught a quiet exchange, a faint chuckle, a sideways glance at his hoodie, and tucked it into the back of his mind. He was no stranger to judgment. But what mattered most wasn't what they thought, it was how they acted. Among the employees, one woman immediately stood out: Linda Carter. With her sharp blazer and impeccable posture, she carried the air of authority. Her every step was deliberate, her expression poised and professional. James observed her from a distance, noting how her polished exterior masked the subtle tension in her movements. She was the dealership's sales manager, someone who prided herself on efficiency and results, a reputation James had heard of but never experienced firsthand. As she approached, clipboard in hand, her gaze flickered over him, her polite smile barely concealing her surprise at his appearance. "Good afternoon," she said, her tone pleasant yet distant. "How can I assist you today?" James met her gaze with a calm smile. "I'm just here to look around," he replied casually. "I've heard a lot about this place." Her eyes darted briefly to his sneakers before returning to his face. "Are you shopping for a specific model?" she asked, her tone carrying a faint edge of skepticism. James shook his head. "Not quite. Just exploring my options." Linda's smile tightened, the corners of her mouth betraying her growing impatience. "Well," she said, glancing at her clipboard, "we cater to a very specific clientele here. Many of our vehicles require pre-qualification." The words were carefully chosen, but their meaning was unmistakable. James raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued by her approach. "Are you assuming I wouldn't qualify?" he asked, his voice steady. Linda hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by his directness. "I didn't mean that," she said quickly, though the defensive note in her voice was impossible to miss. "It's just that these vehicles start at 6 figures. I wouldn't want to waste your time." James felt the sting of her assumption, but he kept his composure. Years of navigating rooms where his worth was questioned based on appearances had taught him to control his reactions. Instead, he simply nodded. I appreciate your concern, he said evenly. But I'd still like to take a look. Linda hesitated again, as though debating whether to push further. Finally, she gestured toward the showroom floor. Feel free to browse, she said. Her voice clipped. Let me know if you have any questions. As she walked away, James let out a quiet sigh. He had expected some level of judgment. But the subtle dismissal still stung. Wandering through the rows of cars, he ran his fingers along the glossy surface of a sleek silver coupe. The vehicle reflecting his image back at him. The interaction with Linda lingered in his mind. Not because it was new, but because of how disappointingly familiar it felt. Nearby, James overheard a conversation between two employees. Their voices were low, but the occasional glance in his direction betrayed the subject of their discussion. He pretended not to notice, his calm demeanor unshaken. Instead, he focused on the cars, noting the care that had gone into their presentation, the fine details that spoke of pride in the dealership's offerings. It was a stark contrast to the subtle biases he had just experienced. His thoughts were interrupted when Linda returned, this time holding a printout. Here, she said, handing it to him. These are some pre-owned models that might be a better fit for your needs. James unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the list of older, more affordable vehicles. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips, not one of amusement, but one of understanding. He nodded politely, tucking the list into his pocket. Thanks, he said simply. Linda seemed taken aback by his lack of resistance, her confidence faltering ever so slightly. If you have any questions, she began. But James interrupted her with a quiet, actually, I do. He met her gaze, his tone still calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. Could you arrange a meeting with the owner? I think it's time I had a word with them. Linda blinked, her composure cracking just enough to reveal her confusion. The owner doesn't usually take walk-ins, she said, her voice tinged with condescension. James smiled faintly. That's fine. I'll call them myself. He pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number, and turned slightly away. Hey, Alex. It's me. Mind dropping by the dealership? There's something I'd like you to see. As he ended the call, James turned back to Linda, his expression calm yet unreadable. They'll be here shortly, he said simply. Linda stared at him, her earlier confidence replaced with a flicker of doubt. Around them, the hum of the showroom quieted as the employees began to take notice. The stage was set, and James was ready to see how the next act would unfold. The quiet tension in the showroom thickened, turning every glance into a question, every whisper into speculation. James leaned casually against the silver coupe he had admired earlier, his posture relaxed, as though this entire ordeal was just another moment in a day filled with ordinary errands. Yet, beneath his calm exterior, he was acutely aware of the subtle shifts around him, the sidelong glances from employees, the whispered exchanges, and, most notably, Linda's growing discomfort. She stood a few feet away, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest like a shield. Her confidence from earlier seemed to waver as she watched James with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Every time her eyes met his, she quickly looked away, the weight of his composure unsettling her. James, however, remained composed, letting the silence stretch. He had no intention of filling the void with reassurances or explanations. He wanted to see how they would respond to the unknown. The sound of the main doors opening broke the silence. A man in a sharp navy suit walked in, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor with an air of authority. Alex Stanton, the dealership's regional director, was a familiar face to James, a professional and personable man with an impressive track record. As soon as Alex spotted James, his expression lit up with recognition. Mr. Parker, Alex called out, his voice warm and welcoming. Good to see you. James straightened and returned the greeting with a firm handshake. Alex, thanks for coming. The entire room seemed to shift in response to their interaction. Conversations halted. Heads turned. And Linda's face paled visibly. She glanced between James and Alex. Her confusion evident. Alex turned toward Linda. His professional demeanor hardening slightly. "Linda," he said. His tone measured. "I see you've already met Mr. Parker." Linda's eyes widened. And she took a small step back. Her usual confidence replaced by a mix of shock and dread. "Mr. Parker," she echoed. Her voice faltering. I didn't realize." Alex's smile was thin. "Mr. Parker is the new owner of this dealership." The room fell into a stunned silence. Employees exchanged uneasy glances. And Linda's clipboard slipped from her grasp, landing on the polished floor with a muted thud. She quickly bent to retrieve it. Her movements clumsy and hurried. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, clutching the clipboard tightly. "I had no idea." James raised a hand. His calm demeanor unwavering. "It's all right, Linda," he said. His tone measured. "Mistakes happen." Despite his reassurances, there was a weight to his words that made everyone in the room lean in, as if anticipating what would come next. James turned to Alex. His gaze steady. "Let's gather everyone in the conference room," he said. "It's time for a conversation." Underscore 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 underscore. The employees filed into the conference room in uneasy silence. The space, designed for productivity and collaboration, now felt heavy with tension. The sleek glass walls reflected the anxious faces of the staff as they took their seats, their whispers fading into the hum of the air conditioning. Linda sat near the back, her usual authoritative demeanor reduced to quiet unease. James stood at the head of the table, his hands resting lightly on its edge. His calm presence commanded the attention of the room without him having to raise his voice. Alex stood by the door, his arms crossed as he watched the scene unfold. "Thank you all for joining me on such short notice," James began, his voice steady and firm. "For those who don't know, I'm James Parker, and as of last month, I'm the new owner of Elite Auto Gallery." There were murmurs of surprise, some curious, others apologetic. Linda kept her gaze down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. James continued, "Today, I came to this dealership dressed casually for a reason. I wanted to see how we operate when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience what it's like to be an ordinary customer." He paused, letting his words settle. "What I experienced was disappointing. I was judged not by my character or my intentions, but by my appearance. And while this may not have been the welcome I hoped for, it's a necessary wake-up call not just for me, but for all of us." Linda shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushed with embarrassment. James's gaze flicked toward her, then back to the group as a whole. "This isn't about blaming any one person. It's about addressing a culture that allows judgment to take precedence over respect." A young sales associate raised his hand hesitantly. James nodded toward him. "Go ahead, Mr. Parker," the man began nervously. "I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand," he said. "We all have biases, whether we realize it or not. But acknowledging them is only the first step. It's our responsibility to challenge those biases and ensure every customer feels respected." He leaned forward slightly, his voice firm. Elite Auto Gallery isn't just about selling cars. It's about creating an experience that reflects excellence, inclusivity, and fairness. And moving forward, that's exactly what we'll deliver. The employees murmured their agreement, though some faces remained cautious. James's gaze settled on Linda. "Linda," he said, his tone softening, "is there anything you'd like to add?" All eyes turned to her. She hesitated, her voice barely audible. I made a mistake, she admitted. And for that, I'm sorry. James nodded, his expression unreadable. Thank you for your honesty, he said. I hope this experience serves as a reminder for all of us. Change starts with accountability. The tension in the room began to shift, giving way to a quiet reflection as James continued. His voice, calm but resolute, carried a sense of authority that demanded attention. This isn't just about one interaction, James said, his gaze sweeping across the room. It's about the way we represent this dealership every single day. Elite Auto Gallery is known for excellence. But excellence isn't just about luxury cars or impressive sales numbers. It's about the way we treat people, the way we make them feel when they walk through those doors. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. We're not just selling cars. We're building trust. Every customer, no matter who they are or where they come from, deserves respect. A ripple of agreement moved through the room. Some employees nodded, while others avoided eye contact, their discomfort palpable. James didn't press them. He knew change wasn't easy, but it had to start somewhere. Moving forward, James continued, we'll implement training programs to address these issues. This isn't about punishment, it's about growth. I want this dealership to set the standard for what a luxury car experience should be. And that starts with all of you. Linda, still seated near the back, hesitated before raising her hand. James acknowledged her with a nod. Yes. Linda. She cleared her throat, her voice shaky but earnest. I want to thank you for addressing this, she said. I know I made assumptions today, and I regret it. I'm committed to doing better. James's expression softened slightly. I appreciate that. Linda, he said. Acknowledging mistakes is the first step. But actions speak louder than words. Let this experience guide you and all of us as we move forward. Linda nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. Around the room, the atmosphere began to shift from tension to determination. The employees seemed to realize that this wasn't just about accountability, it was an opportunity for growth. James stepped back from the table, his voice carrying a note of finality. If we're going to succeed, we have to do it together. This isn't just my dealership, it's ours. Let's make it a place we can all be proud of. The employees nodded, their expressions a mix of relief and resolve. Alex, standing by the door, smiled faintly, clearly impressed by how James had handled the situation. As the meeting concluded, the staff filed out of the conference room, their hushed conversations carrying a sense of purpose. Linda lingered, waiting until the others had left before approaching James. Mr. Parker, she began hesitantly. I just wanted to say thank you again. I've learned a lot today, and I promise I'll make it right. James studied her for a moment before responding. I believe you can, Linda, he said. But remember, this isn't just about words. It's about the choices you make moving forward. She nodded, her expression sincere. I won't let you down. After she left, Alex approached James, his grin widening. You handled that perfectly, he said. I don't think anyone in this room will forget today. James chuckled softly. That's the idea, he replied. If we're going to set a new standard, we have to start by holding ourselves accountable. As they stepped back into the showroom, the atmosphere felt lighter, more optimistic. The gleaming cars and polished floors no longer felt like mere symbols of luxury, they represented potential. And for James, that potential wasn't just about profit. It was about building something meaningful. He glanced at Alex. Let's schedule a follow-up meeting next week, he said. I want to make sure everyone knows we're serious about this. Alex nodded. Consider it done. James took one last look around the showroom before heading toward the exit. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the dealership. As he stepped outside, he felt a sense of satisfaction not because of the confrontation, but because of the opportunity to create lasting change. For James, this wasn't just about running a successful business. It was about proving that respect, integrity, and fairness could coexist with excellence. And as he drove away, he knew that Elite Auto Gallery was on the path to becoming more than just a dealership. It was becoming a place where people and principles mattered. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow over the sleek cars in the lot, James Parker drove away from Elite Auto Gallery with a quiet sense of fulfillment. This day wasn't just about correcting a misunderstanding, it was about setting a new standard. A foundation built on respect, accountability, and a shared vision for excellence. Inside the dealership, the employees reflected on what had transpired, their hearts heavy with lessons learned but hopeful for the future. For James, this wasn't about pride or proving a point, it was about leading by example and showing that change starts with small, deliberate actions. This story reminds us all that respect isn't earned through appearances or titles but through character and the way we treat others. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Life Stories for more inspiring tales that make a difference.